What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Kari.HQ back again with another video. So today I want to talk to you about, is Medellin still the best place to live amongst the other options that we have for people that are looking to expat or visit foreign countries and get that foreign experience? Obviously there's been a lot of bad PR and bad press coming out of Medellin and really all of Colombia, everything from robbings to kidnappings to druggings and things like that. So I was having a consultation with one of my customers, and the question came up: do you still recommend Medellin as, you know, the top destination for people that are looking to branch outside of the United States? This is when I got to thinking, well, if not Colombia, then where else is a good option? So today I want to focus on some of my favorite alternatives to Colombia that soon might become the top dog in the list. For people that work remotely, I want to keep the list focused on countries that are in the same hemisphere as the United States, because I know a lot of people work remotely. So Asia and Africa, Europe pose a special challenge when it comes to the schedule. But looking at just North America, Central America, and South America alone, my mind is filled with a lot of other options that could replace Colombia. So let's get into the list. The number one option I can think of is gotta be Brazil. It offers so much for the expat and the traveler. Some of the upsides to Brazil, some of the positives to Brazil, first is gonna be the time zone. You might be a little bit ahead of the East Coast, but you still can keep your schedule pretty close to the United States schedule if you live in Brazil. Now, mind you, it's still a lot further from the United States than, let's say, a Colombia would be, but at the same time, you can keep that schedule if you're someone that works for a U.S. company. The second big plus to Brazil that I really like has got to be the option to learn Portuguese. Portuguese is a very cool language. It's kind of more rare than Spanish even. So I know a lot of people go to Colombia to learn Spanish, but the option to learn Portuguese is also a really good option, and it's a little bit more sought after and harder to find people that speak Portuguese outside of Portugal, Brazil, and a few African countries. Also, Brazil is a much bigger country and it has so many more places that you can visit. It also has an Amazon region and rainforests and mountains and beaches, probably better beaches than Colombia, to be honest, especially you got Rio and things like that. So the options of places that you can visit within the country of Brazil are way more vast than Colombia. But Colombia still has a lot to see and do. Not saying that it doesn't. I'm just saying that Brazil is just on a whole nother level when it comes to that. And in the same kind of vein, I want to point out that Brazil has a lot more diversity in terms of the type of cultures and people that you'll see. So you got a lot more black people as well, a lot more people from like German and different European country descent. You even see a lot of people that are fresh from Africa and people from Asia as well. So I believe Sao Paulo has the largest, not Sao Paulo, but Brazil has the largest Asian population or Japanese population outside of Japan. So it kind of feels like a New York where it's so multicultural inside of the big cities such as Sao Paulo. That's something that you don't get in Medellin per se, or even Bogota. Bogota is a very international city, but for the most part you see Colombians there. You don't see a lot of people from, you know, Asia and Europe and things like that. Let's talk about a few of the downsides to Brazil that I have to mention, right? So the first one is the cost. It's not as cheap as Colombia. It's pretty close, I would say, but probably somewhere between 10 to 20% more the cost of living in Brazil. So that's definitely going to be a downside. It's going to cost a little bit more, and then it is a little bit further. So getting to Brazil is going to be 8 to 10 hour process versus a 3-hour process if you live in Florida, but for most people in the rest of the United States, it takes about 6 to 8 hours to get from the United States to Colombia, because you're gonna have to connect. But like I said, you could get to Brazil in about 8 to 10 hours if you have a direct flight. So that's something to consider. The flights to Brazil will probably be a little bit more expensive than the flights to Colombia as well, but it's somewhere that is accessible and you can get there. Another main point that I have to point out is the music scene. I think the music scene is going to be a lot better in Colombia because they are one of the centers for reggaeton music, and in general I like reggaeton music a lot more than the Brazilian music. It's more of a live with the band type of music that they play in Brazil. They don't have an equivalent really to reggaeton that I know of, but they do have their funk music, which is more kind of like rap to me in the United States rap. So it's something that's a acquired taste. I personally prefer the music in Latin America and the Spanish speaking countries, which would be reggaeton, but that's kind of one that is up to you. All right, now it's time to highlight another good country that I think is gonna pop up on the list this year, to maybe take off Colombia as the #1. That is going to be Mexico, guys. Mexico, I think, is still slept on even to this day. Let's talk about Mexico and some of the good things about Mexico for an expat or a traveler. The first big thing with Mexico is going to be it's very, very close to the United States, and you can get there for dirt cheap. You know, flights from the US to Mexico are usually going to be direct without having to connect anywhere, and you have a lot of destinations to go to within Mexico and a lot of flight options. You may say, well, Mexico is, you know, one of those places that there's already a ton of American tourists, but I assure you Mexico is so big, kind of like Brazil, but not as big population wise, I don't think. But they have a lot of places that are not frequented by the tourists. You know, there's Guadalajara, there's Monterrey. Mexico City is so big that, you know, it's kind of like Sao Paulo, where, you know, there's so many different cultures there, and you can always find something to do there. So I would still say you can stay away from like the Cancun, the Playa del Carmen, the Cabos, and those types of places, and still find a ton of great options. I mean, even Colombia has tourist places like Cartagena and San Andres that are very, very high tourism places. So either way, I think Mexico, being that it's so close, has got to be a great option. Again, it does have the same time zone as the United States. Depending on what time of year it is, you might be on Eastern time or Central time. There in Mexico, you can also learn a new language. There, obviously, they speak Spanish, so you can still learn Spanish. You have the same opportunities to practice your Spanish that you have in Colombia to practice in Mexico as well. And then I think I touched on it already, but Mexico is a lot bigger, so you got a lot more to do. I would say it's easier to, let's say, expat or travel to Mexico too, because the relationship between the United States and the trade agreements, like if you want to import something, or you can drive directly across the border with your belongings, versus Colombia, you'd have to ship things or fly your belongings back and forth. It's kind of more of a hassle, especially if you have pets and things like that. Now, on the downsides for Mexico, I have to mention that it can be a little bit more expensive than Colombia, I think. You know, my time in Mexico, it wasn't expensive at all. I would still say it's cheaper than Brazil, but not as cheap as Colombia is. So it would be somewhere in the middle for me on the cost of living there. But you can definitely find great bargains on real estate and just daily living when you live in outside of the tourist areas. Mexico is definitely going to be a little bit less diverse as well than Colombia. I think when I think of Mexico, and from what I've seen in Mexico, I just primarily see kind of brown-skinned Mexicans. I don't see a lot of dark-skinned Mexicans. I know they exist, but there's not a whole bunch of diversity in their genetics and in their bloodline in terms of the type of people you'll see there. But that's Mexico for you. It's very true to itself. And I would say Mexico, one good thing that I have to mention is their food. I think their food is probably a lot better than Colombian food. A lot more options for you to eat and try different food. Lastly, with Mexico, there are some dangerous areas that you should, check out whenever you're planning a trip there. You should look into, find out what places are safe, because there are definitely a lot of resources out there that highlight what areas of the country are safe. There are some no-go zones within Mexico that are controlled by drug cartels and things, but generally in the big cities, and you can find out where it's going to be safe, and you have to talk to the locals as well to find out what they're saying. Now, just to wrap up, I want to talk about a couple more options that are probably a lot lower on people's radar, but to me they still offer a really good upside and are places that you can consider if for some reason you don't want to go to Colombia. So you have Peru, which is an awesome country, has a great culture, a lot to do and see. Probably a little bit more expensive than Colombia, a little bit harder to get to than Colombia, but still there's just so much there. And then another great option that a lot of people are kind of already on, but it's just a good one to mention, is Costa Rica, because Costa Rica, while the cost of living I would say is probably a lot higher than Colombia, the safety in Costa Rica is what you're paying for. It's a very safe place. You don't have to worry about half the crime or crazy stuff that happens in Colombia in Costa Rica, because it's just such a chill place. The government is fairly stable, unlike most of these other countries. And Peru and Costa Rica still offer most of the characteristics of Colombia, whether it's that Latin culture. The women in both are very beautiful, and you can learn a new language such as Spanish out there. So there's a lot more to it. Costa Rica has I would say Costa Rica and Peru are just as beautiful when it comes to the geography. To me, Peru's probably number one, better than Colombia. Like, Colombia has a lot of beautiful mountains and stuff, deserts and beaches, but Peru's mountains and beaches and things are just as good to me. And the food down in Peru is amazing. Definitely the best in all of Latin America to me. I think people that have already set up home base in Colombia are going to be a lot less likely to consider moving or going to other places, obviously because they're already set up there, right? But for the people that are not set up roots there and still want to venture out and travel, especially if safety is one of your top concerns, no place is 100% safe. And every single one of these places, bad things can happen. But I would consider most of all these places a medium on security, with Colombia being a high, being bad on security. And then I would say that Costa Rica is the low when it comes to how much guard you got to be on when you're in that country. So Brazil, Peru, I would say medium. Colombia, high guard. You have to be very mindful of what's going on. And Costa Rica, you can pretty much chill out in Costa Rica. There's not too much you got to worry about in Costa Rica, unless you're, doing something very crazy, right? So I want you guys to tell me what other countries you think would be good outside of Colombia and why. Are there any other countries that people are looking into currently, speaking in our hemisphere, where you could stay in the United States time zone? What other options are out there? I want you guys to let me know in the comments. Colombia will always be around, but for many people, they may have traveled there many times and are ready to see something new. How many times can you go to the same place, essentially? I know a lot of people are on trip number 5, 6, 7, and they're just ready to see something new. So I just wanted to throw out a few other places that I've been to that I think you can look at, and for your next adventure. And I'm not making this video with the point to say Colombia's bad or a bad place or anything like that. Honestly, it's still the top dog and probably will remain the top dog in terms of the places that expats from the United States and other countries like to go to. So with that, I'm gonna wrap this video up. I want you to like this video, send it to a friend, and definitely subscribe to the channel if you ain't subscribed yet. We need to get the subs up. It's your boy, HQ. I'm out. I'm dreaming like I'm 7, I'm in heaven, homie. You can catch me on my cover when they didn't know me. Brazil, Mexico, Peru, or Costa Rica? Which one? We out. Like, comment, subscribe.